Move on to the next oral presentation from Mr. Reg McQuaid, as outlined in CMD 13M51.39. Mr. McQuaid, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I have lived in the neighborhood of the GE Hitachi plant since 1981. Firstly, at Primrose Housing Co-op, which is about 2 blocks from the plant, and currently on McFarland Avenue, west of Dufferin, north of Devonport, which is about 4 blocks from the plant. When I moved to that area in 1981, the whole area around Lansdowne and Devonport was a large General Electric plant which was in the process of closing down. I noted the nuclear fuel processing plant because it had a trifoil outside. I didn't actually know what went on in there. It wasn't a very big building, so I imagined it must have had something to do with maybe the fuel processing. But I had confidence in GE, and I didn't really worry about it. However, over the years, I noticed that the trifoil disappeared from the site, and I assumed, therefore, that there were no longer processing nuclear fuel there. So one of the questions which I hope to have answered at the end of my presentation is why that trifoil disappeared. And then around 1997, the sign of GE Hitachi appeared outside the building. And my only personal acquaintance with Hitachi before that was with spark plugs, so I thought maybe it is some small-scale electronics. So I was indeed as surprised as other people in the neighborhood last fall when it was published in the paper that it was a nuclear fuel processing facility. And the fact that there were 2 large public meetings, I think one drew about 125 people and another about 200 people, that is indicative of the fact that people didn't really know about it and they wanted to come and hear. And this is also, I think, 2 years after GE Hitachi got its marching orders, so to speak, from the Nuclear Safety Commission to improve its outreach to the public. So they were not moving very quickly on that point. Now, the neighborhood in which we live, at the time that GE came there in 1907 to build its first plant, it was on the edge of the city of Toronto. Toronto had a population of 200,000 at that time, and rail transport was the only way that industries could get their raw materials and ship out their product. Now the situation has changed fundamentally. At the time that the nuclear processing began around 1960, Toronto had a population of over 1 million. But road transport had become largely replaced rail in a lot of industrial shipping and receiving. So the case that, or the question that comes to my mind is why, after 50 or 60 years of production in that plant, and with a fundamental change in the neighborhood, GE does not decide, as it did back in 1981, to move its production elsewhere because the land had become more valuable for housing, why they cannot take a decision to relocate the nuclear plant. Because if nothing else, I am not a scientist, I'm not qualified to judge on what is right and what is wrong about emissions and things like that. But the fact that it has become very controversial, it's not adding to GE's stature in the community or in the public. It's like a public relations disaster, so to speak. So I can't understand why they are digging in their heels on this issue. Now, concerning the housing or the residential density, back in 1981, when let us put it back further to the 1960s, since that time, the residential density in our ward has increased by 1/3. And if I don't know, I pass by the plant several times a week, so I am quite conscious of how many houses have been built and the changes that have taken place in the neighborhood. And there must be some blinkers on GE that they can't see that, and that it's time to move on. I think the union man who was here earlier today, he noted that it was an old plant. And I think that the investors would have been by now have received their return on investment, and they could relocate it out of that area. And last fall, our city councillor introduced a motion in City Council of the City of Toronto precisely to that effect, recommending that GE Hitachi discontinue the production of uranium pellets at 1025 Lansdowne in order to find another manufacturing use that is compatible with the surrounding community. And another change that has taken place over the past few years is the fracking of oil, getting oil from this new way, especially in North Dakota. And that oil gets shipped by rail and passes, as was already noted by earlier today, past the GE plant, probably within 50 or 60 feet. And we know that human error and mechanical defect, mechanical failure are always a possibility. We always do our best to get it right and to build the transportation correctly, but the already referred to case of Lac Megantic shows that that substance that's passing that plant is highly volatile. If there should be a derailment, and that should affect the GE facility, there could be widespread radiation in the neighborhood. So, in short, if it's so problematic, and if the possibility of accident is there, the very fact that the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is regulating the risk at the plant indicates there is some risk. So why have it in a densely populated urban neighborhood? Frankly, I can't understand it, and that's probably the main reason why I came to this hearing. And if somebody, either the people on the commission or the staff or GE can explain that to me, I will go away satisfied. So thank you.
Thank you. Question? Ms. Velshi?
Question for GE. The intervener states that there was a trefoil symbol before that had been removed. Can you comment on that, please?
For the record, Paul Desiri, I wonder if the intervener remembers the year that was done?
I would guess somewhere in the late 80s, around 1990 or something.
I'm not sure any of us were here at that time. That's a question we'd have to take back with us and investigate a little more. But as said earlier, trefoils have a very specific meaning in the regulations, and it's actually, in my opinion, or I've heard elsewhere, that it's a contravention of the regulations to have a trefoil where not required. So if you have a trefoil to indicate a dose rate above 25 microsieverts per hour and there's no such dose rate, you shouldn't have a trefoil there.
Isn't in Port Hope on some of those for some areas that are fenced, isn't there a trefoil there?
Peter Eller, for record, yes, there would be, because again, it meets the criteria that there could be a dose rate if you were standing at that fence. That would be indication of the hazard being there. So again, the signing in the regulations is based on the presence of a hazard.
Those are the regulations that are being reviewed right now?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Velshi? Any? Dr. McDill?
What is the current municipal, I think I asked this question earlier today, but I'm not sure if the intervener was here. What is the zoning, municipal zoning for this facility? I'll ask G. Hitachi.
For the record, Peter Mason, it's an industrial zoning.
And 50 meters away where the condo is?
Peter Mason, for the record. If you recall the chart presented by the CNSC, we had three zonings. The zoning of the plant was industrial. The zoning of the railway was commercial. And all areas around it are now zoned residential.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to add?
I have a question. Is there something peculiar about the process that requires it to be trucked into Toronto and then trucked somewhere else? Why is there something peculiar about the process that requires that it be processed where it is being processed?
Hitachi?
For the record, Peter Mason, there's nothing peculiar about it that would require it to be processed in the Toronto plant, other than the fact that is where the pellet plant is.
I guess my final comment would be to GE Hitachi, and I would ask the people representing here to carry back a message to their CEO or whoever to consider the advisability of relocating a 60 or 65-year-old plant. So thank you.
Thank you.